About 3 years ago in early November, I decided to go on a solo hike. I usually hike with friends, but everyone was busy, and I was itching to get outside. The trail I picked was new to me, a quieter one, but it was close to the city, so I figured it was safe. The weather was perfect. Cool, with the trees all different shades of orange and red. The first hour was peaceful. I didn't see anyone else, which felt strange for such a nice day, but I didn't mind. It was nice, actually, having the place to myself. At some point, I reached a fork in the trail. The left path led down into the woods, and the right went up a small hill. I decided to go right, hoping there'd be a view at the top. As I climbed, I started feeling off, like I was being watched. I brushed it off as nerves from being alone. But the higher I went, the stronger the feeling got. When I got to the top, there wasn't much of a view, just a small clearing with more trees. I started heading back, but noticed something strange a bit off the trail. It looked like a mound of dirt, fresh, like it had been dug recently. I thought maybe a tree had been uprooted. But there were no roots or branches around, just this raised pile of dirt. Then I saw it. A sneaker, a single muddy sneaker half buried at the edge of the mound. I stared, trying to process it. My brain kept telling me it was nothing, but something about it felt wrong. I wanted to take a picture to show someone later, but as I pulled out my phone, the battery died. My stomach dropped. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps coming up the trail behind me. I froze, not sure if I should hide or run. The footsteps got louder, closer, until they were right behind me. I couldn't bring myself to turn around. Then, just as suddenly as they'd started, the footsteps stopped. I don't remember much after that, just that I bolted down the trail. I ran, without looking back until I saw a couple walking their dog at the trailhead. They looked at me like I was crazy, but I didn't care. I got in my car and drove straight home. A few weeks later, I saw a news report about a missing person found buried in that same area. They didn't give many details, but I knew. I thought about reporting what I saw, but I couldn't shake the feeling that if I'd stayed even a minute longer, I would have been next. Now I never hike alone. Every October, my buddy Mark and I go camping to catch the last bit of fall before winter hits. Last year, we picked a new spot up north, near a lake in the woods. We'd heard it was beautiful but pretty remote, so we figured we'd have the place to ourselves. When we arrived, it was perfect. Bright orange and red trees surrounded the lake, and the weather was cool but not freezing. We set up our tents, made a fire, and settled in. As the sun set, the place turned almost eerily quiet. I thought it was odd we hadn't seen a single other person, but it didn't bother me too much. Around 10 p.m., we were just sitting around the fire, talking, when I noticed something in the trees across the lake. It looked like a flashlight moving slowly between the trees. I pointed it out to Mark, who shrugged it off as maybe another camper. But the way it moved was strange, not steady like someone walking, but more like they were darting from tree to tree. Eventually, it disappeared, and we forgot about it. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of something outside my tent. It was like a soft, shuffling sound, almost like footsteps, but slower. I held my breath listening, then I heard Mark's tent zipper, and he whispered, "You awake?" I whispered back, and he told me he'd heard it too. We both stayed silent, listening. The footsteps moved closer to our tents, then stopped right between them. I could barely breathe. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, waiting for it to go away. When the sun finally came up, we got out to find something strange. Around our tents were fresh shoe prints, large ones, circling both tents over and over like someone had walked around them for hours. We packed up and left in record time, not saying a word to each other. To this day, I have no idea who or what was out there, and I don't think I want to know. I grew up in a small town surrounded by woods. In the fall, I loved walking through the forest trails after school, especially once the leaves started changing. My usual route took me past a few abandoned cabins that had been empty for years. They'd always creep me out a bit, but nothing bad had ever happened, so I kept going that way. One day in late October, I was walking my usual route when I noticed something different. One of the cabins, which had been boarded up for as long as I could remember, had a light on inside. I stopped, squinting at it, trying to figure out if I was imagining things. The place was supposed to be empty. I told myself it was probably a trick of the light and kept walking. But as I passed, I felt someone watching me. I glanced back and saw a face in the window, just staring at me. It was a man, maybe in his 50s, with unkempt hair and sunken eyes. He didn't move, just stood there, watching. I walked faster, trying to shake off the creepy feeling. But a few minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me, heavy and quick. I didn't want to look back, but I couldn't help it. When I turned, he was there, not 10 feet behind me, walking fast but not running. I broke into a jog, and so did he. I cut off the trail and ran through the trees, trying to lose him. I heard him crashing through the branches behind me, getting closet. Eventually, I spotted a clearing and ran toward it, desperate for an escape. Finally, I made it out of the trees and saw my house in the distance. I ran as fast as I could, and when I reached my yard, I glanced back. The man was standing just at the edge of the woods, watching me. He didn't follow me onto my property. He just stood there until I went inside and locked every door. I never took that shortcut again. Later, I found out the cabins were being investigated because of reports of squatters living there.